Put down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. It's an open mic night for photographers. Get ready for 60 minutes of your photography questions in real time with answers from your host, Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, thanks for joining me. It is time, it's Wednesday, so that means we've got another live episode of TogChat. And tonight, it's the TogChat Q&A night, so I've got 60 minutes of your questions and hopefully my answers. So you guys get to decide what we talk about. So make sure that you're posting those questions. Go to tog.chat/question to post your question and make sure it comes right to my desktop, or you can post it if you're watching live right in the chat window on YouTube. So if you've got a question that you want answered, that's the way to get me to talk about it, and I'll do my best. So it is great to see so many of you guys here. Roderick's here, James Parrish is here, I know Andre's here, Jervik's here, Brian, God, we got a lot of people. Nandor's here, Carl's here early tonight. We've got James Mazzone, Sven's here, Linda's here, Mark, James Brown, Doreen. Awesome, gang. Thank you so much for coming out and spending another hour with me on this Wednesday night or Thursday morning for those of you down under. It's great that so many of you actually get up early in the morning. And I love it when you guys post and let me know where you're from. It's always cool to see how we have a worldwide audience here. So please take a second, say hi, let us know where you're tuning in from. So for those of you that are watching me live right now, please take a second and let your social media friends know, especially your photography social media friends know, that we are here and that we are live on YouTube. Spread the word. Twitter is usually the fastest way to get that information out. And while you're there doing the social media stuff and you've got me in the background still listening, make sure that you follow me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, all those places. And of course, you know, you can always go right ahead and hit that thumbs up button right underneath the video. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you just happen to be listening to the TogChat podcast, I'm not live. Well, at least, you know, I hope I'm still living, but please do tell your photography friends about the podcast and about TogChat. Hopefully you'll enjoy it and you'll spread the word as well. So you can download that podcast every Friday afternoon, and that way you'll have some motivational listening while you're out shooting for the weekend. Okay, so if you're watching TogChat on YouTube, don't forget we do this 3 nights a week. Tomorrow night, marketing. All about marketing, websites, social media for photographers. And then we're back every Monday night with a photo review night. And as you saw last week with our interview with Manny Ortiz, I'm starting to mix in some interviews with other photographers to teach you how other people other than myself approach the work that they do. So I've got a question in the queue, gang, already waiting to go. I'm going to dive right in and start with that one first. And this question comes to me from Donna in Jacksonville, Florida. And I thought this would be a good one to touch base on because it's something that I find people routinely misunderstand and honestly don't even consider, which is a problem. So Donna's backstory here to the question. She was approached by she approached a local woman about doing some photos so that she could build her portfolio. She offered to do a TFP shoot with this woman and the woman agreed. So she was very happy. During the shoot, the woman was very fine and happy. Things were going well. In fact, the woman even said that she had worked with some other photographers and didn't really like them because they were kind of very militant and demanding. Sounds like she must have worked with me along the way, right? Anyway, Donna went ahead, edited the photos, sent her the pictures within about 2 hours after the shoot, which, little side note, Donna, from a business perspective, never send a client pictures, whether it's a trade or not, 2 hours after photo shoot. Way too soon, unless the client is paying you tons of extra money to get pictures that fast. And the woman sent back a message saying that, hey, she loved them. She's really, really thrilled. But then, here's where the story takes the twist. About 3 hours later, she got another message from the woman, and the woman said, I decided I don't like the photos. Please don't post them on social media, because obviously this woman lives in the same town that Donna does. So now she's like a little confused because, you know, the woman had access to her Facebook page and saw the style of photography that she does before she did the shoot. They had an agreement to do this TFP shoot so that Donna would get pictures for her portfolio, and the woman would get pictures that she used. And Donna even went to the trouble of, editing the photos and sent them to the woman. But now the woman doesn't want Donna to use them. So the woman went so far as to ask Donna to remove the pictures from social media. Her question is real simple. By law, does she have to remove them? Or as the creator of the photos, is it her right to put them there? So this is a great question, only in the fact that so many people taking pictures today, so many of you that are listening to me right now, don't understand the way this really works. And there are two sides to this. There's a legal side and there's a moral side. And we could even argue a third side is it really worth it side. So let's take the legal side. Now, I know I have listeners here from all over the world right now, but I can tell you that in most countries, these laws are very, very similar. And that is that unless you have had your subject sign a modeling release, you do not have the rights to do anything with those photos that subject does not want you to do. So if she has said, do not put them on social media and remove them, technically, you need to do that. And here's the loophole, especially here in the United States. And as I mentioned, this is the case in most countries around the world. If you were just taking those photographs and, let's say, printing them and putting them in your portfolio. When I'm saying portfolio now, I'm referring to the idea of a book portfolio, a book that you can hold in your hand with prints. Then you have every right, as the creator of the photographs, to do that. But the minute you use those photographs for any type of commercial enterprise, that's when all the rules regarding modeling releases and a subject's rights kick in. And here's the thing you have to understand, that even though you may be putting these photographs on your personal Facebook page, let's say that you've been following my marketing talk chats on Thursday night where I recommend using the personal pages to help promote your business. So let's say your plan is just to put it on your personal page. The problem is Facebook is a commercial enterprise. So you can't put it there if the person doesn't want it there. In fact, if you choose to ignore this woman, and Donna, this is what you need to be careful of. If you ignore her and she sees that you've used the photo on Facebook, she can file a complaint with Facebook and Facebook will have it removed and you wind up with a strike against you. So you risk at that point having your profile shut down. That's a major problem. So, and believe me, it's a real cut and dry thing from the standpoint of appeal. You could deliver to Facebook a litany of emails that were exchanged back and forth between you and the subject describing who can do what and all this stuff. But without a signed model release, they're just going to basically say, too bad. If you have a signed document that says you can use the photos for whatever purpose you want, that's a different story. So the moral to the story, gang, is always get a modeling release if you are looking to use images to promote yourself. And especially if you're doing a trade, or the big phrase everybody likes is TFP, even though nobody hands over prints, they only send digital files. And even in Donna's case, there were no prints involved, it was digital files. If you're going to do a TFP, it's a trade. So it is completely reasonable for you as the photographer to ask the subject to sign a modeling release. And you don't need a big, fancy, super lengthy legalese kind of release. Keep it simple, stupid. It can be very, very basic language. If you're not sure what should be contained in a modeling release, you have a couple really easy options. One, Google modeling releases. You'll find tons of them. Two, there are apps for that. Get an app like the one that I use. It's called Easy Release. Easy, right? I love it because it also allows me, it comes with standard releases in it, and it allows me to upload my own language. So Donna, unfortunately, and this is where it comes to that third option that I talked about, my advice to you would be take your photos down, move on, find a new subject, learn a lesson. Don't feel bad. We've all been there. It's part of the growth process as a photographer. But now in the future, you want to make sure that you've got those signed releases. Okay? Alrighty. So gang, before we get into your questions, and I see we've got some really good questions coming in, just a reminder, gang, if you've got questions, tog.chat/question. My buddy Chad is going to put that link in the chat window here for you. Make sure you get me some questions and I will do my best to answer them. But I want to remind you guys, I mentioned this site last week, and I just want to take a second and show it to you again, bring you up to speed on some of the latest headlines that are there. And the site that I'm referring to is the site called DIYphotography.net. Full disclosure, I love these guys. The owner of the site, Udi Torish, is a man who's been very supportive of myself and what I'm doing with my YouTube channel. One of their, well, actually all of their writers have been very kind to me, but in particular, John Aldred. Many of you have seen John here in the chat while we're doing these live talk chats. If you remember my Facebook group, you've also seen John participating in the Facebook group. So some of the hot headlines right now in the photo world, for those of you that are Sony folks, you should be really, really happy. Sony has released 2 new wide-angle lenses for full-frame cameras this week. They've got the 16-35 2.8 and the 12-24 f4. Got to give Sony a lot of props. Whether you're a Nikon, Canon person, it doesn't matter. Even if you're, Olympus, Pentax, whatever, got to give Sony a lot of props. They are really like guns a-blazing, building out their product line, turning out some really great gear right now. And the best part of it is they're putting the pressure on Canon and Nikon to get off their butts and really start innovating. So the exciting part of all of this stuff that Sony's doing, even if you're not a Sony user, it is going to push the industry to get back to developing new technology, new gear, and hopefully moving forward with mirrorless technology, because hands down, mirrorless technology is the future. I'm a big, big believer in that, even though I'm still holding on to my Nikons, okay? Some other really cool stories out here. Here's the story you should all be jealous about, so you can all go check this out later. A student found a Leica M2 in pristine condition for $2. Can't beat that, right? I mean, talk about the find of finds. But the other one, the other big one that I wanted to just point out, just to go ahead and get my digs in, because I know this company is never going to consider sponsoring me, but ProPhoto released a new flash this week, the B1X. So it's bigger, it's brighter in terms of its monolight, it's got more power in high-speed sync. And so for those of you that like the biggest and the best and the most expensive and have to have all the gadgets, if you've got a spare $2,000+ in your pocket, go pick up one of these and you'll be good to go. Or you could just buy the Godox 8600 for like a third of that price. Or you could realize that you don't actually need all those features to do 90% of the photography that you do and spend a whole lot less yet. So that's an option, okay? And there's another really, really great story, and then we're gonna move on. This is actually written by a retoucher. And you'll notice up here in the upper left, it's called Pretty Girls Make Lousy Models. And I'm actually gonna talk about this in a little bit more depth in a video that I've got coming up. But it's actually an excellent point. Now, her headline, she leaves out one piece. The point that she's trying to make is if you do a Google search for pretty girls, and then if you do a Google search for fashion models, you realize that you see pictures of 2 very different types of women as a result. And that's true. A classically beautiful woman will generally not be a fashion model. Fashion models are kind of unique. They oftentimes have awkward features. So the idea that pretty girls make lousy models is actually a bit misleading, but the idea that pretty girls make lousy fashion models is actually very accurate. And it's something that so many of you overlook when you choose your models. I see all the time, especially in my group, people posting, I wanted to try my hand at fashion. And the girl looks more like a glamour model that just stepped out of a bikini ad. That ain't fashion. So it's actually a really good read. There's some really good points there, but do understand the one thing that you should look at with a slightly broader mindset is when she says the idea that pretty girls make lousy models, really what she should be saying is pretty girls make lousy fashion models. Okay, so let's move on. I got a whole bunch of questions queuing up here now, so let's get you guys some answers. And remember, gang, please, thumbs up right underneath, okay? Your support is really greatly appreciated. So first question I've got waiting here is from Dizia. Since I started my photography addiction, I've mostly done street photography and the occasional odd work event. How can I make money when I can't afford a decent lens other than the 50mm prime lens that I have? Well, I mean, there's kind of two problems to your question. If I can, shall we say, read between the lines of your question, I would make the assumption that you are very new to photography, which means that you need to gain a lot of experience. And especially if you've been doing street photography in an occasional event, it also means that you haven't been doing work that generally requires a broader range of lenses and accessories. So the idea that you want to make money doing it, that's wonderful. But there is a harsh reality in business. There's an old phrase that we use here in the US. I remember hearing this phrase when I was a kid looking to get into photography. And that phrase is, it takes money to make money. So certainly, everybody loves a business model that basically requires no investment and no cash outlay, but yet has great amounts of return. Unfortunately, photography is not one of them. So my advice to you to tackle your situation is you can do an awful lot with a 50mm lens. You can do incredible portraiture with a 50mm lens if you are careful, if you take the time to learn about depth of field properly, if you pay attention to subject perspective. You could do wonderful portraiture and get paid to do it. So honestly, that's my advice for you, is you have to save your pennies. I mean, that's just the simple math, but don't discount your 50mm. Certainly, if you had started your question and told me that you wanted to be a sports photographer, you're kind of screwed with a 50mm lens, but that's not the case. So your challenge is, if you want to make money, find things that you can do with that 50mm and do them. That's what you're going to market, and that's what you are going to try to get people to pay you for. Next up, I've got a question from Mark Cross. I recently traded my crop sensor D3300 to a full frame D600. Congratulations, Mark. If I set my FX body in DX mode, if I set my FX body in DX mode, will this eliminate all the distortion issues that I've read about using DX glass on FX bodies? The two lenses that you kept are the DX, let me get the rest of the question here, the DX kit zooms that came with his old D3300. Okay, so Mark, without getting super technical, to be completely honest, because I don't do the super technical. I am very proud of the fact I am a visual shooter. I understand the technology that I need to understand, and I ignore the rest of it. So for those folks that are engineers, I'm not your guy. That being said, here's the thing about putting lenses on full frame and crop sensors. Distortion is a product of the lens, not the body, period. Okay? So if you're putting a 24mm lens on a full frame camera, you can get, and let's say you're going to photograph a building fairly close, and you tilt the camera up, you're going to get distortion on the edges. That's what happens. It's called keystoning. If you put that same 24mm lens on a crop sensor camera, or if you put it in a full frame but set it to crop sensor and tilt up, you're still going to get distortion. In fact, you're still going to get the same amount of distortion. The only difference is you won't see as much of it because you are working with a smaller sensor. So it's not going to show you the outside edges of the distortion. It's going to crop in. So the first thing that I would say to you is, I have a feeling you've been reading too much. Because for all practical intents and purposes, there's really very little reason for you to be worried about distortion unless you have a very specific type of shooting that you're doing. So, Mark, I know you're here. If you're doing a specific style of shooting that routinely creates distortion, give me a response here and tell me what that is so that I can address that genre of photography or that style or technique, and then I can give you some solutions. But I will tell you that in all practical intents and purposes, please do yourself a big favor. Forget that you ever read or watched a YouTube video that had anything to do with that. because it is not going to impact 90% of what you do unless you're doing something very, very specialized, okay? I mean, I would tell you that, you know, in a perfect world, what you need to save for now, since you've just gone to that full frame body, is you want to save for some full frame lenses, period. Certainly from the standpoint of, you know, use a lens that's designed to work on full frame, it's going to be better than putting a DX lens on the full frame body. So that would be the next thing that I would encourage you to work on doing. And, you know, it's easy for me to spend somebody else's money, but I would have suggested that you not made the leap to the full frame body until you were at a point where you could afford glass to go with it. In fact, generally what I encourage people that are working with crop sensors to do, if they're really looking at going full frame, get the lenses first, then go full frame. If you're on a budget, you know, if you can afford to do it all at once, that's wonderful. But I honestly, unless you give me a very specialized reason where you're constantly dealing with distortion, I don't think it's something that you need to be worried about at all. Next up, I've got a question from James Brown. I could probably do a whole bunch of jokes about that name, but we won't. So James wants to know, he's building his home studio. He's using one monolight with a softbox, and he wants to create the black drama effect. How should I proceed? Well, James, I got to be honest. I don't know what the black drama effect is. I don't know if that's somewhere in there where it's like Rembrandt lighting, butterfly lighting, black drama effect. I'm sorry. If you just mean basically, you know, you want to do black background, one light, heavy light fall off, then that's all you've got to do. Put the light close to your subject. It's called the inverse square law. If you're, for all of you folks, if you're lighting things, in other words, if you've spent money on monolights and softboxes and stands and backgrounds and all that stuff, and you don't understand how the inverse square law works, here we go. I'm going to piss off a lot of people. You ready? You're idiots. You're idiots for having spent the money. I'm sorry, but that's the simple math, gang, okay? The inverse square law is the absolute basis for anything you're going to do with lighting. Okay, James, so yeah, that's kind of what I expected it was. James tells me now in the chat window here, he wants light on one side of the subject with shadows. Well, if you put light on one side of the subject, you're going to get shadows. That's the byproduct of it. But James, you got to learn about the inverse square law. I have a video that's coming out in a few weeks on it, but you don't have to wait for my video. There's tons of stuff online about it. It's really pretty simple. Bottom line is, light falls off very, very rapidly the closer it gets to the light source, and not as rapidly the further it gets from the light source. That's the really short kind of inverse square law for dummies answer. You need to learn a lot more than that to understand it, okay? But that's the short version. So if you're working in a small studio space, and understand too that, you know, depending on how big your softbox is, James, you may have too big a softbox because it sounds like you bought your gear before you figured out how to use it. That's a problem. It's simply a problem. So I can't nurse that for you. You made a mistake. Because to do the light on the one side of subject with shadows, honestly, I do it with direct light. You don't need the softbox. Back in the day, that's how it was done. Can you do it with a softbox? Sure. But if you want the shadows to be harsh and dramatic, then you're going to get that softbox really close to your subject. The closer you bring the softbox to your subject, the more the shadows will happen and the faster the light will fall off. So, got to be perfectly honest with you guys, and this is a great example, James. I'm sorry to pick on you. I'm not trying to be a jerk or be mean, but don't buy stuff just because you think you need it. Start simple, start basic, and build. That's the only way you're ever going to learn this stuff. When I see questions like this, I count my blessings. Even though I hated it at the time, I count my blessings that I started as a teenager and couldn't afford the expensive stuff, because it made me learn how to get things done. It made me learn how stuff really works. And it made me learn, why do I really want to buy something? Because I didn't have money to blow. I couldn't afford to just buy whatever seemed cool or whatever I saw in a magazine. I saw stuff in a magazine. It might take me 2 years to be able to go get it. And by then there's new stuff out, but by then also, I stayed focused on the end result and figured out other ways to do it. There's always another way to do it without buying the expensive gear. So honestly, James, sincere advice. You've got the light now, you've got the softbox, take a step back. If you really want to get good at what you're doing, take that softbox off your light and figure out how to do what you asked me with just the light. And then add the softbox. And if you do that, you're also going to have a better understanding of why you would use a softbox and why you wouldn't use a softbox. Instead of somebody just says, oh, I love softboxes. Because indeed, if you watch me talk, I tell you my favorite modifier is a softbox. So that doesn't mean you should run out and buy a softbox because it's my favorite modifier. Number one, I don't use it all the time. I use it more than 50% of the time, but not all the time. And that still doesn't make it right for what you're trying to do. So your idea of having half the face lit and then half of it dark, I could do that with a direct flash. I could do it with a softbox. I could do it with a beauty dish. I could do it with a parabolic reflector. I could do it with a shoot-through umbrella. I could do it with a Brawley umbrella. I could do it with a Silverline umbrella. I could do it, the list goes on. So it's really about understanding the light, okay? So, Sam Phillips, oh my gosh, and here's the perfect follow-up in this question. Sam says, hi Joe, I'm doing my first studio shoot that I've been hired to do. I'm gonna use a beauty dish. Any tips on grids? So, Sam, listen, I'm sorry. So this is gonna be one of these nights where Joe's gonna have to just really bully people. Is that it? Sam, I have to be honest with you. That question is insulting to a professional photographer. There, I said it. In fact, it's insulting to anybody that actually cares about doing good photography. Let me explain why, Sam. Number one, you have agreed to take money from someone to take pictures. Congratulations, by the way. But now you have contracted to take money from someone and you're on the internet trying to figure out how to do it. That's kind of a problem. And worse yet, you're on the internet trying to figure out how to do it with a modifier that is notoriously known for being challenging to use. And then you want to modify the modifier by putting a grid on it, but you don't know why. Because if you knew why you wanted the grid, you wouldn't be asking for tips. So, to help you, Sam, and just to prove to you that I'm not a jerk and not just trying to bully people tonight, please come back with some more information. Here's what I want to know from you, Sam, before you type. A studio shoot could be defined as a product, a person, a portrait, a headshot, a fine art nude, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So how can I possibly tell you what kind of modifier and how you should use it if I don't know what you're shooting? So that being said, tell me what kind of picture you're taking, what the subject is, and what the intended purpose of the picture is. And then be forewarned, I'm going to tell you to throw away the damn grid because you probably don't need a grid, and you probably shouldn't do it with a beauty dish, but let's figure out what you have, and I'll help you solve the problem. But please, that's not the way to approach this. Don't go into a shoot mandatorily saying you want to use a grid when you don't know why you're using a grid, and especially not when you're getting paid. That's definitely a problem, okay? So, here we go. Now, next up, from Nandor, I have some cool shots of random people that I took candidly on the streets of London. Is it okay to use them for my portfolio and self-promotion on social media? Well, Nandor, they're okay to use for your portfolio if your plan is to get people to hire you to take street photography, which I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but even in London, I don't think you're going to find too many people that will hire you to shoot street photography. So that being said, if it's basically just like an art portfolio, like here's the photography to do, sure. Can you use it on social media? Photographers do all the time, but just like the question that I opened the show with for Donna, If someone were to see one of their photos that you took on social media and decide that they do not want that photograph posted on social media, in the UK, they have the right to reach out to you and say, remove that picture. Parminda, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. So it's kind of a small risk, Nandor, but it is not the end of the world. You're not going to get in trouble for it. You're not profiting by putting the pictures on Facebook. But I would have to state, though, that, you know, if you're hoping to get people to hire you to do portraits, random street pictures that you've taken are not going to get people to hire you to do portraits. So, you know, that's the only thing that I'm kind of getting a disconnect there, is not really understanding what you're hoping to achieve with these photos, if you're thinking they're portraits or not, etc. Okay? So, all right, so backing up here real quick, gang, I've got another response from Sam. He's clarified his point. He's not being paid for the shoot. He has hired, as they say, I'm guessing Sam's in the UK, he's hired a studio or rented a studio to shoot in. So that being the case, Sam, if you have rented a studio and you are going in and you want to practice using a beauty light with a grid, I'm still going to give you part of the same pushback. And that answer is, why do you want to use a grid? What are you trying to accomplish? The way I read your question, you want to use a grid just because you have the grid. And so you're trying to figure out, well, how do I use the grid? And that is backwards. It's just basically backwards. So you buy a grid for a softbox, beauty dish, whatever you're going to put the grid on. You buy the grid because you want to narrow the focus of the light. So, you know, a strobe has a reflector on it, whether it's a speed light that has a rather narrow reflector or whether it's a monolight with a bigger reflector, and that's the angle that the light comes out. So even when you have a softbox that may be, you know, this big around, the light hits the front of that softbox and it spreads to a certain degree. So by putting grids on it, the grids extend out further, which prevent the light from spreading. So it narrows the focus of the light. So if this is your first time using the grids, my advice to you would be experiment. I mean, I don't know, I still don't know what you're planning on photographing, Sam, but I would encourage you to experiment. That's the best way. In other words, for me to kind of essentially give you a roadmap that says, put the light at 45 degrees and make it 5 feet tall and this and that, there are so many other variables, I can't possibly tell you. But are there tricks to using grids? No, there's no tricks. The trick is learn how to see light. Pay attention to the details, do your test shots, look at the results. That is essentially the key, okay? But I would not approach any shots with the idea of, well, okay, you know, I want to use a grid because I want to use a grid. And especially wouldn't buy the grid for that reason. I would buy the grid because I had a need. And more often than not, the reason why you're going to use a grid is because you're working in a tight space and you need to narrow that stream of light so it's not hitting a background or so it's not hitting another part of the scene. Or in the case of a beauty dish, you could use the grid to make sure the light falls off more rapidly at the bottom of the frame. Those would be reasons for using the grid. So that's kind of where you want to start out in terms of how you're making those decisions. So, okay, John Lai's got a question here. When you go on a trip or vacation with your wife, what camera would you bring or just your phone? John, that has long been an issue with my wife and I. So we've been together for 18 years now, and she always wants me to take a camera and take pictures when we travel. When we were a new couple and we're still dating and all that kind of stuff, we did some actually really cool trips. We did a big trip in Italy, Germany, England, and admittedly, I took my gear on those trips. I'm glad I did. When you walk into my house, there are huge prints from all over Europe that are mounted running down a long wall. I'm thrilled with them. It was basically a huge pain in the ass carrying all that gear all over Europe. From there, for a while, I was using the Sony stuff, so that was nice and small. I took the A6000s, which I was using at the time. Now, when I travel and go on vacation, it's this. And I still make big prints. I have 16 by 20 inch prints hanging in my house that I shot as TIFFs on an iPhone. And they're wonderful. And part of the reason you can get away with it is because more often than not, especially for outdoor pictures, when you're traveling on vacation, you're there in the daytime, so the lighting's decent. You know, yeah, if you want to get really fancy and shoot like nighttime shots, or you're working inside in low light, there's certainly all kinds of issues that you could run into there. But for, you know, most of the pictures I do, it's like during the day, here's this cool castle, or here's this cool building, whatever. The iPhone works great. But John, to give you a little bit more specific answer, it's honestly a really personal choice. It depends on what your threshold is as far as wanting to be bothered with the gear. You know, I've been taking pictures my whole life, and so I love what I do, but for me, a vacation is also a chance to kind of get away a little bit. I'm a photographer. I'm always a photographer. That never turns off. So if I see something that's really interesting, I'm going to photograph it. But I'm okay with just doing it with my phone. If I think that there's a situation where I really want something of higher quality and there's a very specific thing that I'm after, well, then my threshold is going to be I need to take that camera with me or take the proper gear with me and work accordingly. Okay? All right. So let's see. D.D. Overton is asking, must you format your SD card? DD, I'm not quite sure. I don't think that's exactly the question you mean to ask me. Must you format it? Well, when it gets filled, you're going to want to empty it. Hence, you should format it. That's a lot more efficient than deleting your files one by one. So the general rule of thumb is format your cards in camera, not in a computer. But yes, I would certainly format your cards from time to time. Absolutely. So Alex Cazares is asking, so do you need a modeling lease to create a street photography book of candid shots? Yes and no and yes, Alex. So here's the thing. If you do a little bit of research in the news, there have been some books and some gallery exhibits of street photography that have been done without releases being signed. And indeed, there's been some lawsuits. And in a couple of cases, the photographers got away with it. But they spent a lot of money on legal crap, where you are going to potentially run into a roadblock with your idea. And I'm going to take your question literally. You're asking, do you need the modeling release to create a photography book? So since you're saying book, I'm going to make the assumption that you are going to use a publisher and have the book published, in which case you'll need releases, because no publisher in their right mind, unless you are really, really famous and really, really controversial and they're willing to take the publicity, they're not going to take your book without the signed releases. So the way the law works is stuff's done in public places and that. There's a lot that you can get away with, but you're going to find, and I even see in the chat window here, somebody's, doing the pound the chest. If it's in a public place, you can use it. Don't be so quick to say that, because that is not necessarily the prudent thing to do. So do your research. I'm not going to give you full advice on how to handle it because I'm not an attorney, so you shouldn't listen. The worst thing you can do with your question, by the way, Alex, is listen to what any photographer tells you. That's the worst thing you could do. If you're that worried, go talk to an attorney. Because that way you're dealing with somebody that's going to have your back if something blows up. I'm a firm believer in error on the side of caution. So generally, if you're going to go to a publisher, they're going to want to have releases, period. Okay? All right, so now let's see what else we have here. Paul Reuter, am I going to do a video on band shoots in bars or events? No, definitely not, Paul. Not really sure why you would think that I would do that if you've ever looked at my portfolio or my line of work. I'm a studio guy. I will be doing a bunch of outdoor shoots this summer for YouTube videos, but they are portraits, that kind of stuff. I've done bands, done all that stuff. I enjoy it, but I will only teach things that I have depth of experience at. So there are other people out there that are doing, bands and bars and all that kind of stuff. That's cool, but yeah, definitely not my thing. So let's see here. Oh, purple. Okay, so Sam's got another follow-up on his question here. He's doing that whole thing with the beauty dish and the grids. He's doing a portrait of his friend to start a portfolio. So here's the problem, Sam, right there. Because I'm still not going to give you the answer you want, Sam. You're going about this backwards, and you're being kind of lazy. To ask me that question, you just need to go use the damn thing. That's what you need to do. But here's the thing. Let me give you some information about portfolios. Using a beauty dish with a grid is like the dumbest thing you could do for a modeling portfolio, period. Modeling portfolios are not creative. If you make a creative modeling portfolio, you're screwing that model. They're not going to be able to use it. They're not going to get work with it. The modeling portfolio is not about how cool or how amazing is the photographer. It's not about how great is the makeup artist or the hairstylist. It's about that person's ability to model, period. So keep it simple, stupid if you're shooting a modeling portfolio. And you ask about metering the grid. Metering the grid is no different than metering without the grid. It's light coming out of it, so you meter it, guys. Okay? Alrighty. So let's see here. Nick Britton. I volunteer with vulnerable adults, so I have to have a DBS check yearly. Is this worth mentioning on my own website that I have a DBS? Not sure what you call it then in the US. So I'm not sure what you call it either. So you might tell me what DBS stands for, Nick. But I'm assuming it's basically a background check. So the point is, if you are marketing to a type of work or an industry or a clientele where that is important to know, then absolutely mention it. If you're not, then no need to mention it. In other words, these clients that you're talking about, the volunteer work with vulnerable adults, I'm going to assume that you're doing photography for some type of organization. So if there's the possibility that other similar organizations will find your website and contact you and hire you, sure, mention it. If the reality is either there are no similar organizations or similar organizations are not going to go Googling, where do I find a photographer that works with vulnerable adults, then there's really no reason to put that on your website, because if you try, or if you expand your client list, you're probably going to wind up doing that by reaching out and speaking with these companies directly is the approach to go. Okay, so I would say it honestly, sincerely depends on where you're going to get your work from and how you expect it to show up. But if that's a selling point and you're expecting people to come through your website, absolutely mention that stuff. Yes. So Sam Phillips, you didn't piss me off, Sam. I want you to really understand. Sam's giving me an apology now for his line of questioning. Sam, I'm being tough on you because if you're following me, Sam, and if you've watched my videos, you know that everything I teach is about basics and building. Basics and building. And part of the reason I teach it, Sam, is because I've made the same mistake that I'm giving you a hard time about right now. And that's kind of getting ahead of myself with gear. I was lucky when I was a kid, I couldn't. But then when I got older and I had money, I did. And I wound up getting a bunch of gear that I didn't know how to use and didn't know how to use properly. And I'm willing to admit, when I say when I got older and did it, I'm talking like in my 40s, which means it was really stupid that I did it. And I promise you that the challenge with this stuff is, and this is, keep in mind, guys, here's a guy sitting on YouTube who makes tutorial videos, who pays his bills by teaching photographers. And I'm telling you that when you ask questions like that, the smartest thing that you could be doing to improve your photography is not watching videos on YouTube. But go pick up the camera. Because Sam, even in, I don't know if you live in a house, if you live in an apartment, you don't have to have a studio. You could set that beauty dish up with a grid, and you could get yourself an inexpensive mannequin head. If you can't afford a full mannequin, you can get a mannequin head for the equivalent of about $10 US, even if it's just a styrofoam one. And practice. Because If you've paid for a studio, here's the thing. You've paid to use a studio for a day or an afternoon or a couple of hours. If you're going to go in and use that time to figure out how to use lighting, to me, that's foolish, Sam. I have to be honest with you. Figure out how to use the light and the grid and figure out how to meter it, since you're worried about that, at home before you get there. And then when you go, you're going to walk in and you're going to have a sense of what you're doing, how to use it, and you're going to have a plan. You're going to have a set of visual reference points based on your experimenting, so that you're not going to waste your money experimenting in the studio. So, my whole thing, people think like I just have it out for the camera manufacturers and that kind of stuff. No, I love gear more than anybody loves gear. But I'm not crazy enough to buy it just to have it. And, I obviously I get myself going all the time about high-speed sync and all the crazy modifiers and all that stuff. The simple point is, all that stuff is really of no value. For all the money we spend on it, it's of no value if you don't really understand how it works. So, Sam, believe me, you didn't piss me off. It's the lesson that I try to teach to people. So really, you just gave me an opportunity to really drive that point home again. But sincerely, I'm asking you, as a favor to me, since you take the time to watch me, practice with that beauty dish and the grid at home. You can photograph anything, even if you don't have a mannequin head. Photograph anything. Just stick an object in front of your camera. It could be a table lamp with a lampshade. And practice lighting it with the beauty dish and the grid. And I promise you, when you get to the studio that you paid for with your model, you'll thank me for that practice if you do it. Because it's going to make a difference in what you're able to do when you're in the studio and you're working real time with the subject in front of you. It'll make a big difference, okay? All right. So let's see, what do we have next here? Linda O. I would be interested in taking a silhouette type picture outdoors. What advice can you give me? Find a really bright background, Linda. I mean, that's really how you're going to get a silhouette, is you want a white background. I shouldn't say white background, bright background. I'll stick with the bright thing. You could do the silhouette against the sky. Like you could do something really cool, maybe where you're like on a hillside and the person's at the top of the hill. So you're just below them and you're looking up, so they're silhouetted against blue sky and, cool white puffy clouds. Or indeed find maybe like a bright wall that you can work when the sun's hitting the wall, and you move the person away from it, potentially into shade, and you'll get the silhouette that way. But basically a silhouette is a scenario where you've got all the light behind the subject. So you need to have an extreme lighting ratio if you are going to do the silhouette outside. So if your subject's in bright sunlight and your background's in bright sunlight, that's probably not going to work. So you've got to be a little bit creative as you look around for your backgrounds to find a situation where maybe you can put your subject in shade and you're going to have a really bright background behind them. That's really going to be kind of your best approach in that sense. Okay? All right. Next questions from Kemraj. I was editing my daughter's pictures I took the other day, and I sort of had a realization that I prefer to use natural lighting versus artificial lighting. Are there any disadvantages of natural lighting when editing? Kemraj, I wouldn't call it a disadvantage or advantage with regards to editing. The difference between natural lighting and artificial lighting is going to be, first and foremost, the look and feel of the image. Natural light has a very different feel to it than artificial lighting. Artificial lighting can be very artificial, and I mean that in a good way, in the sense that it's done to create something that's kind of very unique and different, where the light that's used actually creates a certain mood or tone in the shot. Or the artificial lighting could be used just to supplement that natural light that's there. So I would be careful, because it sounds like you're potentially kind of a new photographer. And I recently did a video about photographic style. I would be careful about making kind of a decision early in the game where you're saying, I really like natural lighting, and that's all I'm going to do. Open your mind to both, try both, experiment with both. That's really going to be very, very important. But in terms of the disadvantages for editing, No. A well-exposed, well-put-together image, you're going to do the same things in editing, whether it's natural light or whether it is artificial light. Now, keep in mind, I'm making some assumptions, and that is that you're doing the right things in camera for the natural light, like making sure that you're using the proper color balance, exposing properly, making sure that you're photographing in decent natural light. Because certainly, if you're in crappy light, you're in crappy light. So, but I don't think it really has an impact on your editing in that sense. Matthew Stover is asking, do you change your picture style settings in your camera? And if so, any settings advice on portraits? I only use 2 different picture style settings on my Nikon cameras, Matthew. And I know everybody calls them a little bit different. Nikon calls them one thing, Canon calls them another, but that's basically where you have the settings for like monochrome, neutral, standard, vivid. Those are all the Nikon names. So I think you Canon folks, you'll figure out what yours are. And Sony's also got a similar set of names. So the only 2 that I use neutral or standard, depending on which camera brand, and then I use monochrome for black and white. When I want a black and white image, I do switch my picture style in the camera over so that I'm looking at a black and white preview on the LCD screen. And I do that because back in the film days, you would light and expose one way for color, and you would light and expose a very different way for black and white. And I still like to do that. If I've got a black and white image in mind, I'm going to light it and I'm going to expose it as if it's a black and white image. So I want to see that preview. Beyond that, I don't play with those style settings. And keep in mind, those style settings are basically like an in-camera adjustment in the sense that as long as you're shooting RAW, all that it's impacting is your camera LCD. So it's that little preview JPEG. It's not actually impacting your file. So provided you're shooting RAW, it's not the end of the world if you're using them, but it's also kind of a waste to keep changing them all the time. Unless, like I mentioned, you want to see how the image is going to look in black and white. That would be my advice there. Okay? So let's see. April's got a question here. And I apologize. Let me get over there so I can scroll down to it. There it is. April wants to know, is there much of a lighting difference between a 32-inch octobox or a 47-inch octobox? I'm not good at visualizing the size difference. So, April, that's another one of those questions. The answer, inverse square law. The difference is going to depend on where you set the light. So if we're basically saying that you're setting the light at the same distance and the same height for both shots. So it's basically the difference between a 3-foot octobox and a 4-foot octobox. 47 inches is 1 inch short of 4 feet. So that's an extra 6 inches all the way around. That's all you're getting, okay? Meaning, no, it's not like, not dramatically, you know, big. Actually, sorry, more than 6 inches. It's about an extra 7 inches all around. Sorry. So yeah, not a huge difference. You're probably finding there's a pretty huge difference in price between the two. The 47 inch is probably going to set you back quite a bit more, but unless you have a situation where you need to be able to move that octobox back, and as a result of moving it back, you still want to be bigger. The 47-inch octobox, you would in theory be able to move it further away from your subject, a little further, and still have it essentially the same size in terms of its size relationship to the subject. So I hope that helps. Nick Britton wants to know, when am I doing the follow-up session for Google Analytics for the Thursday night TogChats? Nick, that's actually a great question, and let me just give you that answer because it is actually on my YouTube channels, which means I should know the answer. And I don't off the top of my head, so I apologize for that. But if you'll bear with me 1 second here, I will get you the answer for that. I believe it is next Thursday, but I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, so bear with me 1 second here. Yes, it is. Thursday, May 25th. That's when we'll be doing Google Analytics for Photographers Part 2. So for those of you that aren't sure exactly what I'm talking about now, the Thursday night talk chats are all about marketing for photographers. 2 weeks ago, I did, instead of a website review, which is what we normally do, I did a full hour of basically what is Google Analytics, why should you care about it, and how do you set it up? The idea being that those that were in attendance can take the time, go set it up, get it working on their website, and then we're going to come back next week and we're going to look at it now that it's running and now that you've been collecting some data and some analytics, and we're going to set up some metrics so that you can actually test and evaluate how your website's working for you, and also learn a little bit more about how people are actually using your website. Because one of the harsh realities of internet marketing is that people frequently don't use your website the way you think they are or the way you want them to. In fact, it's actually worth me just pointing out to you guys here really quick. Let me switch my screen. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more tomorrow night, so I will go ahead and I will tease this real quick while we're here since Nick brought it up. My website recently just went through some tweaking and merging. So many of you know that I had a website which was joeedelman.com that was basically my portfolio website. It had all the big images across the front. And then I had joeedelman.photography that was my blog and some other stuff. So I've actually put the two things together. So joeedelman.com now looks like this. It starts out really on the homepage. It's a blog. I am not actively seeking new clients at this point. So my photos are still here. The galleries are available. Inside, all the images are there, the same ones that you saw on the other site. They can be clicked on, they can be made bigger. But more importantly, which something people have been asking for all along, is this section that you see here, the Learn from Joe. And it's still being populated. Over the next couple of days, you're going to see a whole bunch of new stuff coming in here. But basically, what you'll find in here is the schedule of anything and everything that I am doing from a teaching standpoint. All the TogChats are in here, the Patreon Zoom chats. If we jump ahead here, because I know these are popular, we jump ahead to July. In July, I'm going to be in Amherst, Massachusetts for a weekend speaking at the New England Camera Club Council. I'll be doing a workshop on social media for photographers on the Friday morning. And then I'll be doing a talk about simple approach to portraits that flatter. And starting in June, and this part I'm really pretty excited about because this is kind of a very different type of thing. So make sure you double check my website, bookmark it. But starting in June, I am going to be offering photography workshops all over the world. We're going to use digital technology and live streaming to do it. They will be small group workshops on topics like lighting, portraiture, some retouching and post-production work. The workshops will be 5 attendees maximum. They will be anywhere from a 2-hour workshop on up to a 6-hour workshop, and completely interactive. We'll be using Zoom Room technology so that I will be able to demonstrate things, share screens, show what I'm doing, but you as an attendee will be able to be in the space where you shoot, whether it is a studio, whether it's your living room, whether it's your garage. You'll be able to set up your laptop with a webcam, attend this, and after I do my lecture and demo, you will turn around in your space and you will try to replicate the things that I have just taught you. And I will be able to observe you do it. I will be able to interact with you, and I will be able to help you refine your technique. The best part of these, since obviously I don't have to get on a plane to travel all around the world to do that, I can do it from my home base here in Allentown, Pennsylvania. The cost will be very reasonable compared to a workshop if I were to travel. So stay tuned. I'll be talking about more here on TogChat as it goes live. I'll be adding those over the next couple days. Some of the marketing materials are being completed right now. I'm waiting for those to come back. So all of this basically website workover has been in the works to get all this together. So a lot more information. Also the information on doing the photography consultations. You can do a one-on-one video consultation with me for an hour. If you are available or accessible to Allentown, Pennsylvania, I do one-day personalized workshops where basically, you come into my studio and we spend a day going over whatever you want to do, whether it's lighting, whether it's posing, whatever kind of camera techniques, that's what we deal with. So all that information is available now at joeedelman.com. The link is in the description below. Okay, so let's get a couple more questions here, okay? I've got one from Matthew Stover. Do you know of a great retouching checklist for things to make sure you do for a retouch? Matthew, I've seen such things, and My sincere advice, I've been hardcore all night tonight, so I'm going to stay hardcore. Ignore those. Make your own. And here's the thing. When you start doing lists like that, they kind of become rules. I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this. Which one means you're being lazy. What you're doing is you're applying a list to your picture instead of looking at your picture and seeing the details. Because if you need a list to tell you what needs to be improved on your picture, you still have a lot of work to do. So I know your response to me is probably going to be, well, I'm just learning and it would really help me. No. Actually, I would argue that it wouldn't. Because what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to be lazy in the learning curve. And it's also going to start to create a habit that says each picture you have to do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this. And that is not how you do things creatively. My advice to you is, sincerely, do a lot of retouching. You do a lot of retouching, you'll create your own mental work list. You'll create a workflow in your head that will work, okay? So, that being said, I would ignore the list, okay? I see MathFan here has decided to call me out on the octobox thing. MathFan1, you're missing the point about that octobox. It has twice the surface area, but it's the outside dimension that ultimately matters. So the twice the surface area bit, it's still not going to have any impact on the inverse square law. That's my point. So you can throw all the math at me you want. Let's get 2 of those in a studio, and I'll throw your math right out the window. The inverse square law is what the factor is. That 47-inch box compared to the 32-inch box is not that much bigger unless you're going to have it right on top of your subject. But if you're going to back it up, it becomes smaller very quickly. So the real key to that question is, how close does April like to place her boxes to her subject? And is she always going to place it at that distance, or will it be at different distances? So please, the one thing that you never want to do, don't hit me with math, because the math is crap. For all the math that you're going to throw at it, let's go practice it. And then the math goes out the door. The inverse square law, you don't need to understand the equation. In fact, if you ask me to tell you the equation right now, I don't know, and I don't care. But I'll put the inverse square law to practice better than any mathematician will. That's my point, gang. So the best way to understand this stuff is simply, and even, my sincere advice, if you don't believe me, folks, pick a point that's your subject. Set something there. Walk 4 feet away and hold a tape measure out at 32 inches. And if you have a light stand, pull a light stand up and put a piece of tape at either end of the 32 inches. And then go about another 3 feet and put another light stand up 47 inches. And then go back to where your subject is. And you're going to realize that both boxes are about the same size. So the point is, if that 47-inch box comes closer, then it's bigger. If it goes further away, it's smaller. So in terms of which is better, it all depends on how you're going to use the box. And it depends on what you want out of it. 47 inches could be too much light if it's close. It could also still not be enough if it's further away. So the answer is not in the math. Is the math correct that it's double the surface area? Sure. But does that solve her problem? No. Because if we look at it from a perspective of how that light's going to hit the subject, that doesn't apply. Okay, so let's get one more question in here. We're actually doing good for time tonight. A biker's POV, is there a way to make a quick buck in photography? Seriously? No. So that's as much of an answer you get there. Sorry. So I Am What I Am has a question. I said that was going to be my last question. I can't end with that. I'm not even going to honor that question. Sorry. In closer portraits, I Am What I Am. In closer portraits, there is too much stuff in the eyes with umbrellas, reflectors in strange positions, etc. Do you have preferences for catch lights, especially for reflectors below the chin? I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about that. I Am What I Am. And the reason being, you'll find I have a lot of strange catch lights in my shots. In fact, I'm really big on those vertical catch lights from my fluorescent tubes. It's not so much that I like them. I like the light from the fluorescent tubes. So I will say this to answer your question. Number one, I find that the only people who ever worry about the catch lights are photographers. I have never had a subject in one of my photos ask, inquire, point out, discuss, say they hated it, my vertical catch lights, ever. I've had a lot of photographers say, oh, no, catch lights should be there. Catch lights should be here, okay? So, hang on one second here, guys. There we go. We're going to get rid of him because I have no patience for that crap. The thing with catch lights is I look at the catch light simply from the standpoint of, is it obnoxious or not? Generally speaking, if a catch light is obnoxious, there's a couple things going on. Number one, it is either in a weird location. So the first thing I mean about that is normally our brain, the way our brains are wired, we expect to see light coming from above, not below. So if you get a catch light on the bottom of the eye that's really, really bright, it usually stands out as being kind of odd. Plus, if you get a catch light on the bottom that's really, really bright, you're also probably going to have top shadows on the cheeks, on the top of the nose, which is not going to be flattering. So, I think the way that I would kind of answer your question about preferences is to say that I don't have a preference, but what I don't like is a catch light that stands out for the wrong reasons. I guess probably my personal taste is I'm not a big fan of shots where you see like 4, 5, 6 catch lights in the eyes, unless it's a natural light shot in a natural light setting. But I don't think that I would actually encourage you to worry too much about the preferences. Because believe me, you will find a lot of photographers that will tell you, oh, the catch light should always be here. It should always be there, all that kind of stuff. No, not at all. If you're doing the right things in your shot and you have got your subject comfortable and relaxed and showing a pleasant personality, you're not going to notice the catch lights. Photographers will. Normal people won't at all. So somebody's asking here, how can I become a member of my group? My buddy Chad's going to post that link into the chat window in just a second, so you will answer that. And April, definitely save yourself the money on that big octobox, unless you're trying to create like a big, huge window light type scenario and you're going to keep it close to your subject. Other than that, not going to be a huge deal there. So Roy Patton, the Saber Strip light video will be coming out in the next 2 weeks. So I know you guys are really jonesing for me to get back to the tutorials. Sorry, gang. There's a whole lot of stuff that has been going on to get these new website changes made. Again, I'm at that. I'm coming up on that 1 year mark. If you guys have been here kind of pretty much from the beginning, one of the things I told you was that June 1st last year, I gave myself a year to reach a certain set of plateaus so that I could continue doing this YouTube thing. The good news is I've reached them. Everything is going as planned. Well, I shouldn't say everything's going as planned, but I met all the criteria that I needed to make. Clearly, over the course of the year, I've learned a lot of cool new stuff, come up with a lot of cool ideas. When I first started this a year ago, I had no intention of doing these live shows, and that was a whole big learning curve. So literally for the last couple of weeks, the tutorials, they have been extremely scarce. I've got about 15 of them that have bits and pieces done. So I'm still working on things. The editing is the really time-consuming piece. So now that the website is launched, I am supposed to have the rest of the marketing material back for all of the live workshops tomorrow. All that stuff will go live, and I can get back into getting the tutorials out and getting them out on a very regular basis. So don't fret. The tutorials have not gone away. I am not going to be doing just live streaming. God, no. Believe me, the nice part about the live streaming now is I've got it down to a very manageable amount of time in terms of my day and my weekly commitment. So yes, going forward, you'll be getting lots more tutorials. I will tell you guys that just not to discount the video before it even comes out, but those Saber strips, do understand they have very, very limited use. Even if you bought like the real ones, they have very, very limited use. If you guys have really followed the way I teach and what I talk about with lighting, I like broad, big light sources. So any way you play it, those saber strips are very small. I will tell you, one of the things that I did with mine was created a face to it so that it pushes light out on a bigger spread than the actual saber strip brand name does. But yeah, they're coming. I mean, got a bunch of stuff in the works for you guys. I know a lot of you are really jonesing to get back to those videos, and I appreciate your patience and hanging in there. But don't worry, they have not gone away. That is still really the focus of what I'm going to do and what I intend to do. So just a couple quick reminders here, gang, to finish up. If you are a person that listens to podcasts, you can get the TogChat podcast now on iTunes. Comes out every Friday afternoon. You can also get it at Google Play. If you have not seen my Patreon page, you really should check it out. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You can actually be a supporter on Patreon for just $1 a month. That's like $12 a year. That's 3 cups of coffee at Starbucks. And that will give you access to things that you don't get on YouTube, the things that you don't get on my website, and even gives you access to the Friday night Zoom chats where all of my patrons, we get together via video, we spend an hour face-to-face, and we chat, we talk, and actually we have a lot of fun. So I would encourage you guys to check it out. And also, I've been mentioning this for the last couple weeks, the discount code is still good. Those of you that have seen me use the Satellite 3D software, which is the software I used in the last frame videos, you can check it out at this link that I just dumped in right there. You can get 20% off. This discount is good until June 30th. Use the Happy Edel 20. Whoops. It's Happy Edel 20. Leave that 20% out of the discount code. And you'll be able to get that discount all the way up until the end of June. And I will tell you, I probably shouldn't tease this, but I'm going to tease it anyway because I'm pretty excited about it. The folks at Elixir Software have shared with me some screenshots of some changes and some new features that are coming to the software. So understand, once you have that software, their upgrades are free. That's the best part. But they're making some user interface changes in the way it's laid out. Awesome. It's going to take this really, really great piece of software, make it even better yet. So I'm really excited about it. I would encourage you guys, check it out. They've got a free trial download. It's a fully functional free trial. So if nothing else, I would encourage you to go download it and try it. If you don't like it, don't buy it. But I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. It's actually really pretty cool stuff. Okay? All right, gang. So again, thank you very, very much. Tonight was a tough night. I hate being tough on people, but it's like, gang, the bottom line is you got to put in the hard work. If you want to get good at this photography, you can ask all the questions you want. You can watch all the videos you want. You are not going to get good at taking pictures with a consistent level of quality unless you pick up your camera and set up your lights and use it. And then do it again and again and again. So I hope to see you guys tomorrow night for Marketing TogChat. If you're not ready to go pro yet, you don't have an interest in the marketing stuff, have a great weekend. I hope to see you Monday night for our photo reviews and photo news night. And in the meantime, gang, please remember these very important words. Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now go pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.